I feel badly for General Flynn. I feel very badly. He's led a very strong life, and I feel very badly. Hillary Clinton, on the 4th of July weekend, went to the FBI, not under oath. It was the most incredible thing anyone's ever seen. She lied many times. Nothing happened to her. Flynn lied, and it's like they ruined his life. It's very unfair.
What we're beginning to see is the putting together of a case of obstruction of justice.
They were talking about collusion this time 6 months ago, but there's no evidence of that, so now they pivoted to obstruction of justice. If Comey felt obstructed, he did a masterful job of keeping it out of any of his memos.
Well, it was Trey Gowdy on this show earlier. A busy news weekend when it came to the subject of these investigations, multiple investigations. Here is the House Intelligence Committee chairman. By hiding from Congress and from the American people, documented political bias by a key FBI head investigator for both the Russia collusion probe and the Clinton email investigation, the FBI and DOJ engaged in a willful attempt to thwart Congress's constitutional oversight responsibility. The DOJ has now expressed on a Saturday, just hours after the press reports on Strzok's, this is this deputy director for the FBI counterintelligence, dismissal, appeared a sudden willingness to comply with some of the committee's long-standing demands. This attempted 11th hour accommodation is neither credible nor believable, and in fact is yet another example of DOJ's disingenuousness and obstruction. A lot of talk about obstruction. We'll sort it all out with this panel. George Washington University Law School professor Jonathan Turley, Molly Hemingway, senior editor at The Federalist, and Susan Page, Washington bureau chief at USA Today. Susan, let's start with the president and what he tweeted out, what he's talked about when it comes to Michael Flynn. It seems like that got a lot of attention. It was later determined that his lawyer had supposedly dictated that tweet. Where do you think the fallout from all of that is?
I think we don't know the full fallout. I think there are a lot of questions we won't know until this investigation is complete. But I think this is clearly unhelpful to President Trump and his allies, that this raises questions about the timing of when he knew, his actions in dealing with James Comey. And I think it's perplexing that he continues to tweet in ways that undermine his own interests.
Molly.
Well, throughout the year, the FBI had kind of said they didn't think it was a very serious thing that Mike Flynn had talked this way with the FBI, only to find out last weekend that he's now pleaded guilty to it. So I think it's kind of hard to build up an obstruction. I mean, there might be a case to be made, but it's also worth considering that for much of the year, the FBI was saying they didn't think it was a big deal. It seems like a bit of a change.
All right, Jonathan, that is the big question over the weekend. And here is the Alan Dershowitz and his thoughts about obstruction.
There's never been a case in history where a president has been charged with obstruction of justice for merely exercising his constitutional authority. That would cause a constitutional crisis in the United States.
Your thoughts?
Well, I'm afraid I have to disagree with my friend Alan on that. I've always taken the view that a president could be charged with obstruction. But in fairness to Alan and Mr. Dowd, the president's attorney, this is a good faith question. You know, the professors use this as a parlor game for years of whether a sitting president can be indicted, the meaning of emoluments, whether you can self-pardon. It just happens that this administration seems on course to answer all of them. And hopefully we won't, but certainly they've all become much, much more relevant. But I actually think a president can be charged with obstruction, but it really doesn't matter, because obstruction can be the basis of an abuse of power charge for impeachment. Everyone agrees that
Which is a political process, we should point out. And that is a political process that goes through the House and then is adjudicated in the Senate. And we saw it with Clinton and Nixon.
Right. And the thing is, I think we're still too early for that. It's painful to watch another generation of tweets go awry. It's sort of like the old joke of going to the doctor saying it hurts when I do this, and the doctor says stop doing that. And it seems like someone has to tell this White House, stop doing that. It's causing you a great deal of harm, and it is. You know, they really did take care of this by saying this wasn't Trump's words. The lawyer fell on his sword. But this still opens up an area for Mueller. He doesn't have to accept that explanation.
How big an issue is this other investigation into the anti-Trump texts, and how much that deputy director for counterintelligence was tied into key moments like the interviewing of Hillary Clinton, the interviewing of Michael Flynn, the changing of the words about the Clinton email investigation?
Right. There is a very strong case to be made that law enforcement agencies and intelligence agencies have not behaved in a way that inspires confidence with this entire situation. They were playing around with a dossier that they had no business playing around with. Then they leaked that they were playing around with a dossier to legitimize a frankly insane conspiracy theory. You had James Comey going a conspiracy theory about collusion with Russia, which I think we all now know has no basis.
Or at least we don't know what we don't know.
Well, I should say, we have no reason to believe after a year of investigation on this. You had James Comey privately saying that Donald Trump wasn't under investigation while publicly intimating that he was. And and it's not just that it was this handling of the investigation, it's also comparing it to the Clinton email investigation, where you had immunity handed out like candy to Clinton associates. You had obstruction of evidence with 30,000 emails being deleted, and you had a pre-conclusion that she would not be held accountable for her crimes, and then to find out that the same guy who changed the language from gross negligence to extremely careful was also the guy who started the Russia probe, and he's also the guy who interviewed Flynn. We're seeing all these reports. I think that people who care about the integrity of these law enforcement agencies should be very concerned about all this news that's coming out.
Does this mean that this is a long process? Do you think that this is going to continue into the new year, well into the year?
Oh, yes. I think there's no question it's going to continue well into. The idea that this is about to wrap up, I think, is foolish and wishful thinking on the part of the White House. This is going to go on for a while, and things like the controversy over the FBI agent, which I agree it's wrong. You shouldn't have people taking a partisan point of view and conducting these investigations, are just going to make it go on longer.